What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. Rich Quinones here. As always, check us out online, the YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q, social media at Rich Q on Q, IG and Twitter, hashtag BYP. My guy, Jovan Alford, kind enough to join us. Does a great job, content producer, sporting news, Total Sports Live at Jovan10. He's feeling pretty good. He must have nailed all these XFL arena player props. I don't know where the money comes from. I don't know what you're doing. And I don't know, you're pulling some of these props out of your what, but it's always good to have you on a little BYP, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, XFL has been pretty profitable for me for 2 weeks, so I'm not mad at it right now.
All right, well, hold on. Let's get into that. Hold on, let's get into that right now. Are you doing more player props, or you're doing just game? Are you doing totals, or are you doing odds?
Sadly, we don't have player props, and I understand why, because it's very finicky. Like, I do DFS, and like it's really hit or miss. Luckily, I've been able to hit on a couple of lineups, but it's really just been, playing the point spread, like just knowing, like it's really like it's not like how it is with like the NFL, where we're really like thinking about like the against the spread at like home on the road. Like, we're not thinking about that. If anything, you're thinking about it. And I think that's how most sports fans should think about betting, right? Let's just think about it as the actual game. Like, whose defense is playing better, whose quarterback is playing better. So that's how I kind of been looking at it, and have come up pretty well for the most part. I think week one, I think I went 3-1 week one, so it wasn't bad. And last week wasn't pretty bad either. I think the only one I didn't get last week think was probably the under in San Antonio, Orlando. But other than that, hit the spread. Oh, and I didn't get the spread in the Seattle St. Louis game. That missed because St. Louis came back. But defenders smashed the spread there on the money line, and got San Antonio on the spread, and then got Houston on the spread as well. So doing pretty good so far.
That's not bad. All right, I'll save a couple plays for when we wrap it up on this Wednesday of BYP. All right, let's do a little housekeeping on the NFL. I mean, I don't even know what do we make of Gardner Johnson, with this tweet. It seems everyone now wants to kind of tap dance on Jonathan Gannon's grave, but yet when they were getting to the quarterback, when they were having turnovers, when they were having interceptions and pick sixes and 70 something odd sacks, everyone loved this guy. I mean, I listen, ultimately, when you're out on the floor, or you're out on the field, or you're out on the ice, or you're out on the diamond, it's your job to get it done, period.
Right.
So
right.
I don't like this pissing on the coach because you guys didn't have a great defensive effort in the second half of a Super Bowl, right? I mean, it happens. I mean, how much stock or blame do we put in again? And I don't know, are we siding with the player here?
For me, I don't side with neither side. I thought it was funny that he came out of there and it did it. Does he have a gripe with it? Maybe, right? Because you probably, as a player, right, you probably look back at him like, man, we just left so many plays out on the table that could have been had. Like CJ Gardner Johnson, I guess, he actually wasn't one of the people that just didn't look confused on defense. Like, he actually played pretty well and laid the big hit on Pacheco in that game.
Yes.
So I think, probably just the lack of adjustments, which I think, fans, harped on a lot. Like, you're not adjusting. And I think also, too, a lot of people didn't hear from Gannon even after Super Bowl, right? We heard from James Bradbury. Bradbury owned up to it. Like, hey, it's a hold, it takes full responsibility. But Gannon is like, you don't hear from him.
Back.
Yeah, slipped out the back. Stayed in Arizona. Eagles tried to pay him to keep him stay. He said, "No, I'm gonna be head coach." Stayed in Arizona, and then the first time you hear from him is at the NFL Combine. So probably a little bit, probably some players, probably are some players that feel a little certain type of way, because it's like, yo, man, like, we lost Super Bowl, defense performance wasn't great, and then we don't hear from you, until the scouting combine. But luckily for Gannon, he won't have to hear the end of luckily for him, we won't have to hear from it no more. Because this is just going to be in the story. Now he has to focus on fixing broken franchise in the Cardinals, which need help big time.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got a prima donna quarterback who rather studied a friggin' playbook. So who you telling? I like the move, and you mentioned this. It was inevitable with Brian Johnson, right? I mean, look at what he was able to do with Jalen Hurts. we can talk about whether it's an upgrade or not. I think it is. And I mean, I thought their offense clicked big time this year, but he obviously had a hand in it because if we look at the growth, right? We always talk about the growth of a quarterback from year number 1 to year number 2. But in this case, it was a couple games year number 1, full season in year number 2, and now a bona fide star in year number 3. So was this more of a, we really appreciate what you're doing, BJ, or you know what? We really understand the value that you're bringing to this organization and working closely with Jalen Hurts? Or I'll give you a third option, a third behind the door. Or is this Jalen Hurts who has a little more cachet now with the organization, more input like, hey, man, this is my guy, elevate him?
I mean, I think there probably could be a little bit of that, with the third option, but I think it's probably mostly the two, right? Having, and, even Hurts saying, even before the season started, right? Having the same offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, head coach, consistently for a couple of years, it really helped them. And who knew, right, that it would actually help them, that having that consistency kind of paid off. And I think for, Brian Johnson, for him to come in as a guy that was at the college ranks to step in to the pro game as a quarterback coach, even a former quarterback at Utah, to him to step in as a quarterback coach saying, hey, your job is to get Jalen Hurts, a guy who a lot of people didn't know what could he become at the pro level, and kind of mold him into something. And like you said, didn't really, Johnson came to staff, second year? Yeah, it had to be second year because first year Hurts was a Peterson. So yeah, correct. Second year, first time starter. There was some bumps in the road, right? But he eventually got it together, figured it out, and then, like you said, took this leap. So I think it's definitely that, and the consistency, that they have, right? You hope that they continue to keep the play calling the way it was when Steichen was involved, because I think Steichen, did a very good job of play calling, even though there were some games where you're like, why are you not running the ball? Why are you not throwing more? Like things like that. I think overall it's good. So I think for Brian Johnson, it's definitely a little bit of both of the first and second option. Also a guy that, is rising up in the ranks in terms of being a head coach, right? Like if he puts together another good, season with Hurts this year and that offense stays up, we could be talking about Brian Johnson, the head coach soon, because there's a lot of offers for him to be the offensive coordinator in other spots, this year.
Yeah, it's a good point. I want to stick with the NFC East for a minute. Still, we don't know what the Giants are going to do with Saquon. It does look like they'll come to a contract with Daniel Jones. Dallas is Dallas. And then you got Washington. I tweeted this out the other day, Carson Wentz. I still, for the life of me, right? I mean, once Carson Wentz went, well, let me backtrack. Once the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts, that's when everything kind of came out regarding Carson Wentz, teammate, rogue, not going over to plays. He has now become such an afterthought. But if you go back 2017 and you look at his numbers, Carson Wentz doesn't get hurt on the road against the Rams. Carson Wentz is the MVP, but we don't know if the Eagles win the Super Bowl with Carson Wentz under center. To me right now, he is a journeyman quarterback, right? And that's why I said he went from savior to front-running MVP to injury prone to benched to bad teammate to now a journeyman quarterback. I mean, can you recall a quarterback over the last 15, 20 years that has had such a drop like that, like Carson Wentz has?
Ooh, that's a good one. Man, that's tough. It really hasn't been many. It hasn't really been many.
But what do you chalk it up to? Is it mental? Like I'm hearing a lot of people say, well, he just couldn't stand the fact that they drafted a quarterback. Hey, no quarterback who believes they're the franchise quarterback wants the team to draft a younger quarterback, right? To kind of look over them. But I go back and correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was Doug Peterson said years ago with Sam Bradford, hey, as long as you do your job, you don't need to worry about looking over your shoulder. So that applies with 31 other quarterbacks.
Oh, yeah.
In the NFL. Right. So, or was it the injuries or a culmination of everything?
I'm gonna leave with a culmination of everything. And I think the injuries definitely played a part because he hasn't been able to look like the same guy that he has before. But also, just as a quarterback, he wasn't making some of the reads that you need to make, right? Yeah. With the Eagles towards the tail end, he was making throws where you're just like, What are you doing? What are you seeing? What are you like? Where's that ball going? That's not supposed to be. Even with his season with the Colts, right?
Horrible.
Frank Wright brings him on, pretty much not gonna say risk his coaching career, but risk his job there to say, hey, I'm gonna bring him here to be the starter, and we'll see what we can do. Even though people pointed at Wentz's stats saying, he only had like 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, something like that. It wasn't great because look who we had in the backfield with him and Jonathan Taylor, who was really the soul of that offense. And even during that season, he had some questionable throws. I'll never forget that game against the Raiders where he threw in the triple coverage.
And Jacksonville.
And somebody caught it. And even in the game of Jacksonville, right? It came where you need it. He completely implodes. And then we kind of see the same thing in Washington. He doesn't. And we saw that early, right? Especially when he played the Eagles the first time around. He was just completely shell-shocked and just did not look like the guy. So, yeah, it's tough. I mean, a guy that was the second overall pick behind Jared Goff, who knew Jared Goff would have the better career than Carson Wentz, because a lot of people liked Wentz because of the athleticism, the big arm. They were infatuated with that. But it's been the guy, that was drafted before him that's been better, that's been able to adapt in his situation and kind of figure it out.
And everyone thought he was going to be a franchise quarterback, Carson. Mm-hmm. I remember watching games with my friends. I'm like, this kid makes every friggin' throw. Like, is this normal? Like, what is it? Robo quarterback? And the kid that they draft to sit behind him and maybe be a project going forward with Jalen Hurts is now a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. But you know how the league is, man. If the Darnolds and the Baker Mayfields can get jobs, and to some extent, Teddy Two Gloves, who's been injury prone throughout the course of his career, unfortunate because he had talent early on with Minnesota. Those guys can get jobs. There's going to be a team dumb enough or desperate enough that needs a starting quarterback, and they're going to sign him to like a 2-year deal.
Yeah, but the thing is, right, who's going to take that risk? Like, you look at right now, who's the team that needs a quarterback that's going to really take that chance? Like Carolina with Frank Wright, he's not going back down. He's not going back down that door, to do that. Maybe New Orleans does, because
if
Dalton
that's the case, I was going to say, you make a run a car, you keep Winston. Well, what about Tampa? What about Atlanta?
Atlanta, maybe you could, but then it'd be another situation, right, where you're competing against a younger guy, and who knows, can he really, withstand that competition? Tampa Bay is interesting because he will be going to a spot where you don't, obviously there's Leonard Fournette's going to be cut, but you still have 2 good wide receivers, and they're in a position where they don't really know anything about Kyle Trask at this point. He's a guy that they drafted. So maybe there is a spot there for him, unless, the Buccaneers say we'll take Jimmy Garoppolo to fill in that spot left by him. So it's going to be interesting to see where he goes. Like, will he be a starter, or will he have to be a backup behind an established starter just so he can fix the mechanics and just fix the things that he needs to fix?
I don't think he's fixable. Right. I think he's, if you equate it to a golfer with the yips, I mean, he looks like a shot fighter.
Yeah.
He is mentally broken. And I think it might just be clipboard from here on out for him, unless, as we mentioned, a team gets desperate. All right. Speaking of desperate, this nonsense going on in Washington. I mean, I feel as though it's not being talked enough about with Daniel Snyder and, this alleged fraud and the $55 million loan. And, it's a flat out mess. And what's really bizarre is I don't want to hear that the NFL kind of turns a blind eye to this. I mean, the NFL knows everything. And the fact that they're not digging and investigating, it kind of tells you the league, the commissioner, so to speak, right? Then, maybe Daniel Snyder's got something on, Roger. Hey, man, I don't know. This guy claims to have, stuff on everyone. I mean, I don't know. I mean, who, for all we know, he's the one that probably leaked Robert Kraft, smoking and joking in massage parlors. We just don't know what has transpired over several years. But, all jokes aside, it's a really bad look. And he is, without a doubt, the worst owner you can argue in professional sports, let alone the NFL. I feel as though he's almost playing chess and everyone else is playing marbles when you think about it, not checkers,
Mhm.
marbles. Because when the shitstorm happened with, the NFL and all those harassment issues and, the cheerleaders and sexual harassment and the toxic environment, he basically said, yeah, you know what? I think I might sell. I would consider selling. So what did he do? He kind of, dangled the carrot in front of
Yep.
everyone. Then the smoke and dust settles. And now all of a sudden he reneges on the deal and he's like, I'm not selling. I
Which
mean,
which which is messed up. And even like you said, when the cheerleader incident happened, you would thought that would have been the final, like the final
yeah,
blow. Like, because of the NFL, you can't have that black mark on you, especially from an owner, right? An owner that's supposed to be
no,
leading an organization, a franchise from the front office level, and that didn't do it, right? So at that point, when that didn't happen, you're like, oh, this guy's untouchable. Like, there's anything that he does, he still can't be stopped. And I think we're still seeing it now, right? There's nobody, he can't be stopped. Nobody's like not forcing him out to, sell the team. He kind
yeah,
of just has this weird staying power, and like we said, it puts a dark mark on that, that franchise, because you're not thinking about, oh man, the Commanders, they just signed, they added Eric Bieniemy, they have exciting young players on offense, or guys on defense. You're thinking, yeah, but they got an owner who's like terrible and does like terrible things. It's almost like in the same vein of like Robert Sarver or like, Donald Sterling in the NBA, like that mark of just like, yeah, this dude's bad news and you're not, but they did something about it, right? No students said something was done. Here is like nothing's being done at all.
no. He bought Washington for 800 million in 1999. So the peak, apparently there was a max bid of 6.3 billion. Let me just give
Wow.
how many head coaches in 23 years do you think Washington's gone through?
I'm going to say 15.
Well, that's a lot. 10 is a
Oh.
lot. 15 is like, all right. Just like the quarterbacks, right? If you go
Yeah.
back to
There's
99,
a lot of
I
quarterbacks
mean, I
came
think
through.
Jason Campbell had 3 straight seasons where he started all 16 games, which was like, whoa, 164, 22. I'm sorry, 164, 220 and 2. That's their record. They have not gone past the divisional round. You've got fans, and I get it because of the proximity up and down the parkway, up and down 95, Eagles and Giants and Jets fans, Ravens fans, they invade that stadium. 10 head coaches in 23 seasons. It's ridiculous. And the fact that, pretty much financial misconduct with a $55 million loan, man, I don't get it, man. I don't get it. All right, let's close out with a little NBA and then we'll get some football picks if you got anything on the XFL docket. All right, couple things. So the Sixers turn around and they lose a tough one to Boston, and then they lose a game to Miami. And anytime you take on Miami with Jimmy Butler, the reason I love Jimmy Butler is because Jimmy Butler he's an elephant. He doesn't forget. He takes
Yep.
everything so personal, and he wants to re-stick it to people. And I have that somewhat same type of personality, not the whole personal stuff, but I want to
Right.
stick it to people, right? I want to stick it to people. So I love Jimmy Buckets. But is there cause for concern with those 2 losses, or those are just, hey man, those are 2 hard fought games against 2 hard fought opponents, and it doesn't mean that they're not far away from Boston or closer to Boston. It's the NBA and it happens.
That's how I kind of look at it as. I look at it as like you have one of the hardest schedules in the second half of the regular season. So you're going to have a lot of situations where you're going to go up against playoff teams. Now, how do you play in those crunch time moments will kind of define, how people will view you, right? They open up the All-Star break. After the All-Star break against the Grizzlies, they were down, but they come back.
Yep.
Grizzlies not in the same level as like a Boston or even a Miami, but a playoff team nonetheless. They were able to get the job done. Boston, they had a lead. They don't make adjustments in the second half. Al Horford goes off. You get a good contest on Jason Tatum on the top of the key 3, but it doesn't go your way. And then, like you said, Miami game could have won that game. Had a lot of plays where layups weren't falling at the end. And again, last come down to the last play, but this time they don't convert. And be passes out the double team maybe slightly too late to Hart, and he can't knock it down. So how I view it is you're 1-2 and you're 1-2 in close games. Now,
Yeah.
how do you fare against Miami tonight? how do you fare against Dallas tomorrow and then Milwaukee this weekend? You can kind of change the tone if you can rip off 3 wins against those teams, kind of change the narrative about yourself.
Absolutely. You can change it quickly. Durant suits up tonight for the Suns. They're 6-4 in their last 10. They covered, I think it was a 3.5 road dog Sunday against the Bucks. They're 33 up, 29 down. All of a sudden, the Hornets are a friggin' covering machine, man. They covered the other day as a 7-point dog against Detroit. They won 5 straight after dropping 7. They've got a horrible home record. But again, you look at a game like this and you look at the line. Is this KD's night? And hey, stay away from this type of game.
10 points.
Lot.
It's a lot. I mean, Charlotte's without LaMelo Ball now because he's done for the year with the fractured ankle. So you talk about a Hornets team that was really leaking oil with, just having Ball and Rozier kind of carrying it offense. And then you lose your main point guard. It's tough. 10 points is a lot to lay in this spot. Maybe you do something, depending on your book, maybe you do some type of like small same game parlay where you're taking the, Suns money line and maybe mixing it with, a KD prop or Booker or something like that to kind of bring it down to plus money. So you're not facing that minus 520 tax on the money line.
Yeah, which there's not a ton of value with that. I don't like that at all. The only other game I'm looking at is Cleveland and Boston. Boston's laying 5. They lost to my Knicks, who, oh, by the way, are on fire. But listen, prior to that, 7 of 8. I love the backcourt. I love Tatum. I love Brown. But I also like what Cleveland's doing. If anything, I'm actually thinking about playing the over in this game.
Yeah, I think the over probably is a good play just because a lot of people might think it's an underplay because of how good defensively these two teams are.
Correct.
But these two teams also have good offensive players, right? Like you mentioned, Tatum and Brown, even Malcolm Brogdon, coming off the bench is nice. And then for Cavaliers, you got a dynamic backcourt and, Garland and Donovan Mitchell and then Evan Mobley, who I think a lot of people really aren't talking about it a lot, is really coming to his own as a second-year player. Like he's a really good power forward, and you combine that with Jared Allen too. It's going to be a fun game. I wouldn't even be surprised if some people even take the Cavs on the spread just because they're just that good of a team where they might not have it some nights offensively. But one thing I do give JB Bickerstaff credit for, and that even goes back to last year, is that he gets his guys to defend and they play very good defense.
You have any other games or player props that stick out tonight?
For me, probably Manuel Quickly over 12.5 points tonight against the Nets. Quickly has actually scored in double figures like in 8 straight games. Like he's been really good for the Knicks, and obviously the Knicks have been good.
That Hart acquisition is huge, man.
Yeah, and you in Thibodeau, you need a guy like that, right? A guy who doesn't need to score a lot in Hart, but he can do everything, right? He can grab boards, he can get assists, he can play defense. Like he's the perfect like Thibodeau player that can kind of like fit in there. And I like Quickly too. I think Quickly's playing well. Last time they've played against the Nets, he's actually scored like 14 or 16 points in the last 2 meetings against Brooklyn. I'm pretty sure. I know it was double figures, so he's going over this number 8 straight games. So I like this number for Quickly. And then other matchup I think I have is Brandon Ingram over 25.5 points against Portland. Pelicans aren't playing good basketball. They're really struggling. They need something, and obviously Ingram, they're going to try to win this game tonight, I would think, because just of the playoff standings. Ingram has been shooting the ball a lot. Like in his last 10 games, he's taken like 21 shot attempts from the field. And that's because they don't really have anybody else outside of CJ McCollum. So he's going over this number in 5 out of 10. He's actually had 3 other games with at least 25. So I like this one. And then I also like Portland on the money line tonight. I think, they lost last night, but again, I think this is a spot where they've actually been pretty good. I think they're 17 and 14 at home, but they're actually coincidentally they're 17 and 14 against the spread at home. And they've actually played pretty. They've played good as at home favorites, and even on the second game, when they have no rest, I think they're like 6-4 against the spread. So they play good against the spread. Meanwhile, the Pelicans have not been great against the spread on the road. I think they're just straight up. They're 10 and 21 on the road. So it's not great picking. So that's where I'm kind of laying at for those 3 games.
I don't blame you on that one. All right. We got 4 before I let you out of here. You got a light afternoon on Saturday in the XFL with your Sea Dragons taking on the Vipers. And then you got 3 on Sunday, Battlehawks, Defenders, Guardians, Renegades. I got to love these names. What is this? Brahmas and the Roughnecks. I guess that'll cap off the night. You've been waiting all day for XFL. It's Sunday night. What do any of those games jump out on a Wednesday?
Yeah, I've actually made my picks already. Haven't logged them in, but pretty much have
what
them
a
all locked
degenerate.
up.
Go ahead. What do you got?
Right now for me, I like the Dragons. I like the Vipers plus the 3 points here, just because number one, the Sea Dragons, while they do have a very good offense, right, with Josh Gordon and Ja'Cory Pearson, wide receiver wise, they're good. Even defensively, they're solid. However, Ben DiNucci has been kind of turnover prone. In these first 2 games, I think he's had at least 4 to 5 turnovers.
Horrible.
So I can't really get behind that. And I think Rob Woodson and the Vipers, I think they have a very solid defense. Quarterback, they kind of turned the reins over to Brett Hundley. He didn't play well, but also that field wasn't very good and it was raining. So I like them. They kind of keep it close. That defense looks good with Vic Beasley as well. So I like them plus the 3 to keep it close. They might not win it, but I think they can definitely keep it close against June Jones's offense in Seattle. The next one, the Battlehawks and Defenders. It's a close one. I think this is obviously going to be the best matchup of week 3 by far. 2 undefeated teams. Battlehawks have kind of been like the fourth quarter kings to start the XFL season. Adrian McCarron is like prime Tom Brady in the fourth quarter. He just always finds a way to win. But that's my issue. They don't play complete 4 quarters worth of football. And you can run on this defense, and that's something that the Defenders do well. Abram Smith, the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft, he's played well. De'Aaron King, the former Miami Hurricane quarterback, they're running that running game with the RPOs, the read options very well. So I think the Defenders is -2. I'm just going to play the money line straight up. I don't like playing anything under 3, on the spread. It's a little, the hook can kill you, especially in this league, because you do have the 1 point, the 2 point,
that's right,
and the 3 point conversions, which makes the last 2 minutes of XFL games just tremendous to watch. And then for the last 2 games on Sunday, I didn't want to do this, but because it's a large spread, but I'm going to take Arlington minus the 8.5, just because the Guardians are the worst team in the XFL. They're just completely look not a good football team on neither side. Quarterback is an issue. Paxton Lynch didn't look good. DeAndre Francois struggled as well. I know they had Quentin Dormady starting in week 1. He was okay, but still had, turnovers. And I think Arlington, even though their offense isn't up to par, they do have a very good defense at all 3 levels with Bob Stoops. So I like that. And then the last play, I like the Roughnecks -4.5. Wade Phillips has done a good job so far with that team. I think it's now 4 at some spots, which is even better. I think that's good too. They have a very good offense. Brandon Silvers, Deontay Burnett, Jontre Kirkland, Max Borghi. They have a lot of guys on offense that can really put it up. And even Hans Ward, I'll give it to him. Hans Ward team, after losing the way they did in week 1, giving up 12 unanswered points in the fourth quarter, they did a great job last week. He had those guys playing really good football. He's been one of my surprises, because you just didn't know what to expect as a first-time head coach, but he's definitely a leader of men and definitely have that locker room believing. However, I just think the Roughnecks, they're one of the complete teams in the league, offensively and defensively. So I'm going to take the Roughnecks.
Thought we'd ever had a sentence where we said the Roughnecks are the most complete team in the league. There you have it. Our XFL, our expert analysis to breakdown right there. I'm going to throw a couple of shekos. I'll be texting you throughout if some of these games don't fall my way. He is Jovan Alford. Check him out on social media at Jovan10. Does a great job. Content producer, Sporting News, Total Sports Live as well. And how about this? A little 8 p.m. on Philly radio tonight, right? With Jody Mack. Little pop there.
No, yesterday. It was
yesterday. Oh, yeah. Man, I was going to give you the good pop, man. All right. All right.
But I do have the interview. I do have the interview in my email, so I'll forward it to you.
Right church, wrong pew. But yes, I would love to hear this spot. Please forward it to me. All right. So forget about the pop right there.
It's all good.
In Philly radio. But nonetheless, you get him every week here on BYP. All right, my friend, I always appreciate a couple moments. Good luck with those props and those XFL games, and we'll do it again next week, pal.
We'll be back at it once again.
Yes, sir.